The vegetable oil industry was kind of born in the early 1900s, right? The first vegetable oil product was Crisco. Those oils were used for the Industrial Revolution. They were used to lubricate machinery. And then they figured out how to bleach them and make them look white. It was actually Procter and Gamble that figured out how to do that. They were going to make it into a soap. Soap is made from oil. Instead, they're like, that looks an awful lot like lard. Let's try to sell it as a food. Yeah. So they started to sell it as a food. Hardening vegetable oils is done through a process called hydrogenation, and that produces trans fats. These trans fatty hardened oils were started to be sold to Americans in 1911. So coincidentally, heart disease starts to take off, right around maybe like 10 years later. We start seeing increases in death from heart disease. And so Procter and Gamble had this brilliant advertising campaign basically saying, give up lard. Those are the bygone days of your grandmothers, and, have Crisco instead. And this is the newfangled thing made in, shiny scientist kitchens. They kind of tinkered with the fatty acids to make them stable. So here's where they started to influence nutrition science. In 1948, the American Heart Association, which is really just an association of cardiologists, right? Remember, heart disease is new. Tiny little association. They barely had an office. They were just they barely had any funds. Procter and Gamble comes in and says, we're going to make you the designee of this radio show for a week. And it was this huge deal. Overnight, literally, according to the official history of the American Heart Association, they said millions of dollars flowed into our coffers. We became overnight the powerhouse, opening offices all across the country that we are today. They're still the number one largest non-for-profit in the country.
Amazing.
All thanks to Procter and Gamble. And pretty soon thereafter, they started to recommend that you start eating vegetable oils to prevent a heart attack.
Mm-hmm. Which was the worst idea, because it turns out that trans fats, everybody agrees in this, have killed hundreds of thousands, millions of people over the decades.
Trans fats are bad for health, clearly bad for health.
And now they're ruled as not safe to eat by the FDA after 50 years of pressure to change that.
Right.
And finally took a lawsuit from a 97-year-old scientist who first discovered this 50 years ago to get them to change.
So it turns out that oils are highly unstable. That means that they oxidize. They go rancid. Remember, that's why we take antioxidants, because oxidation causes inflammation in your body. Oxidized LDL is what's thought to provoke that unstable plaque that causes heart blockage. On all those studies, again and again and again, the people on the vegetable oil diets died at much higher rates from cancer. This was considered a side effect of this heart-healthy diet. And they actually had a series of very high-level meetings at the NIH in the early 1980s to figure out what was going on with this side effect of cancer. And nobody could figure it out. And they basically just said, look, we believe that vegetable oils will help people prevent heart disease, so we're going to ignore the cancer effect.
These were sort of invented 120 plus years ago. And we now have increased our consumption of soybean oil, for example, 1,000-fold. And it's 10% of our calories, and it's in everything. It's stuff that you wouldn't imagine is in. So any processed food that you buy that's made in a factory probably has this oil in it or some variety of it.